Okay, so I did my topic on domestic violence awareness. So, according to Department of Justice, domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that one partner uses to gain or maintain control over another intimate partner. So, can anyone guess what percentage they think that domestic violence accounts for in all violent crimes? Okay, Zoe. 80? Okay, Zoe. Okay. It's actually way lower. It's actually 20%, which you'd think it'd be higher because it's such a common problem, but that is what I'm going to be tackling in my presentation today. So, some statistics is the left pie chart represents that 1 in 3 women are victims in a domestic violence relationship compared to 1 in 4 men. And as many people can assume, men are the main perpetrators of abuse, but that doesn't mean I'm excluding that men can't be either, or women can't be. But often men are reported abusers in many cases. And the abusers are often younger, suffering mentally, or have experienced abuse themselves. However, that doesn't justify them. So, 3 to 10 million children within the last year have experienced domestic violence between their parents, and a reported 550,000 children and adolescents have been victims of domestic violence at the hands of their parents. And children are often caught in the middle between a mother and a father. And children from birth to age 3 have the highest rate of victimization, that being 27.7%. And slightly more than half of the young victims have been girls, and that statistic being 50.9%. So there are 3 steps that an abuser takes to fully lure and capture their victims. The first one is tension building phase, and this is where the abuser slowly starts critiquing the other person, like telling them what to do and who they can and can't hang out with. The next stage is battering phase, and this is where the abuse escalates to becoming physical and extremely violent. And the last phase is the most detrimental. This is where the abuser will basically cut off all abuse at a random time and start to lure their victim back in by being loving and showing them only their good side. And then once they see it, the victim is 100% back in, then they immediately start the abuse again, which will cause psychological abuse to the victim. So my first biblical integration is Proverbs 3:31, and that says, "Do not envy the oppressor and choose none of his ways." And this verse basically warns us to not envy those who prosper through violence and wrongdoing, and how we should not choose their ways. So there are 6 types of abuse that the Department of Justice has qualified as domestic violence. And the first one being physical, which is the most common. That can be hitting, kicking, forcing alcohol and or drug use on the partner, and also denying the partner medical care, because if the partner gets medical care, the doctors can see the bruises, and if the doctors see the bruises, they can speculate that they are being abused and call the cops. The next form is sexual, and that is where the abuser forces the victim in any form of sex act, whether that be physical or non-physical. Physical sexual abuse is either marital rape and non-marital rape, and the percentage of women who are raped trumps the percentage of men, that being 9% of women and 0.5% of men. And an average of 24 people per minute are victims of rape. And non-physical sexual abuse is sexting and nudes. The next 2 is psychological, and I want to start off by why can't victims just go and report the abuse? It's not just embarrassing, which is what most people think. It's physically and mentally harmful. And when you've been through a traumatic event multiple times and for an extended amount of time, your brain will start to block out what has happened. And that's what makes it hard for abuse victims to recall exactly when, where, or who the abuse happened. In extreme cases of abuse, the victims will develop extensive psychological responses to the trauma. So there's two main forms of psychological responses. Stockholm syndrome is where the victim begins to sympathize with their abuser and form a psychological connection with them. And battered woman syndrome, or otherwise known as intimate partner syndrome, is where the victim feels helpless and believes that the abuse in which they are receiving is justifiable and acceptable because the abuser has made that person's self-esteem so low. So one woman I want to talk about is one of the most influential women I found while researching my project. Her name is Carol Tracy. She created the WAA, which is the Women Against Abuse organization. And she created this because she was an abuse victim herself. And she realized when she was able to leave her abuser, there was no one there for her. And so she didn't want anyone else to feel that way. So she started a nonprofit organization for those who have been through the same thing she has been through. And the organization started in 1976, and it started out just as a hotline out of her garage. And based off of the amount of calls that they received and the severity of them, she realized that she wanted to create a safe house. So if those women or men were able to get out of their abusive relationship, they had somewhere to go. And the first safe house could accommodate up to 8 to 10 people, mainly that being a mother or father with 1 to 2 kids. But since 1976, the organization has grown so big that they've been able to place safe houses all over the world. And today, the organization has helped more than 1 million abuse victims worldwide get back on their feet. I'm going to skip down to the third bullet point. And she is a leading expert in institutional response to domestic and sexual violence against women and teens. And that correlates with the last bullet point because she led a major reform back in 2011 because when she was in high school, she saw 2 girls in her grade got raped and they went to the police and the police didn't do anything. And so she went toe-to-toe with the Philadelphia Police Department and won the reform, basically causing the Philadelphia police to retrain their cops on how they should handle sex crimes. And the second bullet point is she's been working to improve women's rights for over 30 years, and she's worked in the realms of reproductive rights, discrimination against women in the work environment, welfare, athletics, and education. And she's also the executive director of the Women's Rights Project. So there are a few movements I want to talk about that have really helped diminish the statistics of women being abused because it's showing light on those who have been abused and causing more people to rise up and talk about it. So the Me Too movement began in 2006 by a woman named Tarana Burke, which advocated for women in New York who have been a victim of sexual violence. And it's essentially if you're talking with someone and they said, oh, I've been an abuse victim, then you can start talking about it, and people will be like, oh, me too, me too, me too. The next one is the Protect Your Daughter, Educate Your Son. And this slogan was created in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and it means that parents should educate their children, mainly their sons, because if they do that, we won't have to worry about protecting our daughters. This isn't a movement, but this is a line that I thought perfectly correlates with my presentation. It said, if you're neutral in situations of injustice, you've chosen the side of the oppressor. And I mean, I think that correlates this perfectly because if you see violence going on and you don't say anything, then you're choosing the side of the oppressor and you're not allowing that one person to be saved or get out of their situation. This next movement is pretty easy to guess. If you break the silence, we can stop the violence. And the more we talk about it, the more the statistics hopefully will go down of the women being assaulted. And the last movement is the Real Men Don't Commit Crimes of Violence to Everyone. And this is basically a sexual assault movement. If you join in with this movement, you take your hand, you place in red paint, and you put on your face, and that signifies that you have been raped or you have been sexually assaulted. So I have a few solutions to this problem. Granted, we're not going to be able to 100% solve this problem, but there are ways that we can help the statistics go down. First off is intervening, which might be really scary to a lot of people, but the high risk of abuse becoming a generational cycle. So like if you see someone who has a child and they're abusing their wife or their girlfriend, the child will grow up thinking that's how you treat women, and it will become a generational cycle of abuse. The next one is you're not alone. It might feel like you are, but you're not, and having someone to speak up for you if you're unable to is really good because you have someone to back you up. And as Christians, I believe we're called to help those who are enduring pain, and victims need our help more than we realize. And also learning the signs is a good thing to do because once you see the signs, you'll be able to help prevent someone else from falling into the trap. Like if you see your friend is getting love bombed or manipulated and you realize, oh, that's a sign, then you're gonna be able to help them not fall into that.
Olivia. Like I said, guests, if you got any comments or questions for Olivia, go for it. I can start if we need to. Good job with it. Appreciate you working on this. Not an easy topic to have to talk about, but obviously the statistic at the beginning where you had us guess, you said 20% of violent crimes. I don't know. I know everybody was guessing a little bit higher. That's still, sorry for my weird brain, but I'm thinking okay, all the violent crimes, there's a lot of different kinds of violent crimes. And so to think that a fifth of those are some sort of domestic violence, that's not a small number, right? I just want to point that out. That's still a really high number compared to all of them. I also liked that you mentioned, and it may have not necessarily been the direction of your project, but if you got anything else to add, how much of this impacts, yes, you have the abuser and the victim, right? But whenever it's in a case of a family, in a situation of a family, how much, I would imagine we would want to characterize the kids as some sort of almost like a second-hand victim, if you will. Did you see anything about the impact that it has on kids when they, you mentioned it and it just kind of stood out to me that, yeah, whenever there's a situation between mom and dad, the kids see that, or at least even in just being in the house, there has to be some kind of impact, right?
Yeah, it becomes a psychological impact to the child because they'll grow up and they'll just think, oh, that's just normal for me. That's just normal. And Zoe's presentation, she talked about if you give a kid a piece of paper or you ask them to play house, they'll draw their house based off what they see at home. So it will stick with the child for a long time, especially if it's years and years and years of seeing the abuse, and sometimes the child can be abused. I think it's extremely detrimental to their psychological health.
Because then imagine it's either, it goes one way or another, whether they themselves become abusers or are more likely to be abused just because, this is how this works. So yeah, that's a really important point, I think. And I don't know, as far as questions, you kind of, the typical questions I think that would come up is what do I do if, whether I see a friend or if I'm in a situation like this, and you kind of answered all of those, so good job there. I just, this is not a question that has a specific answer, I think, but the question that keeps lingering in my mind is what, I get what okay, the slogan that was, one of the slogans that you put up there, I get that a lot of times you have to reduce something to something that somebody will remember, right? So yeah, thank you for explaining all of those. But then that one where I have a daughter, that helps. Protect your daughter, educate your son. Okay, that one. I have a daughter, I have a son. I get it. I want to protect my daughter, I want to educate my son. I just wonder if there's more to it than just, I guess the lingering question for me is okay, so one, how to protect my daughter? I don't want to be some overbearing dad that just never lets his daughter do anything. Although sometimes I kind of feel that way, the way the world is these days. Can't you just stay at home the rest of your life? Which frankly these days she's kind of okay with. But then also educating my son, educating him on how not to be an abuser, but also not to be abused himself, right? So again, like open-ended question, feel free to comment however you want to, but like how does a parent, Bible teacher, whatever, how do we do that? How do we protect and educate?
Well, I can speak on the educating part. It's not just like educating them that like don't fall into the abuse. It's mainly teaching them that, you know, this is how you properly love someone, how you properly care for someone. And the reason why they made that slogan is because like kids that grow up with abusive parents, they're gonna start doing that to the person they love because they think that's okay.
Right.
So if you have a healthy relationship when you're married and your son sees that, he's gonna properly portray that to another woman.
Yeah.
So
So it's almost like not a specific lesson to teach as it is like, hey, I just need to be the kind of person I'm supposed to be,
Yeah.
and then that gets passed down. Good answer. Okay. Anybody else? Classmates, or anything for Olivia?
Yes. Why did you want to choose this topic?
I think it's just a very controversial topic, and I, for one, have been in a relationship like this, and it felt like I mentioned earlier, I feel like you could be alone, but you're not. And I feel like letting people know that, and not just like keeping it down inside. Like if you go and tell people, the situation you're in will start to get easier. Not easier, but like easier to talk about. And I feel like once we make this topic not scary in a sense to talk about, then more people will understand that, oh, I can actually speak up about this and I'm not alone. So I think that's why I chose it.
I have a comment too, because you were talking about Zoe's and yours, and I mean, often sometimes it's a cycle, and you know, you guys, if something does happen that this is, you're involved in this, you know, there's cycles that we have to break, and it can be anything from, you know, abuse or whatever, and so I think it's very important to know, you know, it can be broken, you know, the cycle, you wanna stop it, so if something's happening within your family, or, you know, within people that you know, there's always that hope, and that cycle can be broken with therapies and with Jesus, and so it's interesting to sit here and hear both, because both of these, you're talking about a cycle that's not just in one generation, it's, you know, in the families a lot, and some of the, you know, it's not only physical either, so.
I just thought that whenever you think about abuse, you think about being physical. Like I didn't know about the technological or the economical, but now that I researched it, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So I feel like us knowing more about like the other type of signs that you wouldn't normally think of is a good way to educate ourselves on this topic.
Anything else?
So do you think like a lot of these like overlap? Like if one person does one specific type of abuse that like they're doing the others?
Yeah, I think that it all, like all the forms, I feel like they're, like all together they're one. Because if you're abusing someone, and let's say like you get in an accident, they go to the hospital, they're gonna see those bruises. They might not think, oh, it could be from this accident. Like I feel like once you do one type of abuse, you're gonna slowly go to other forms of it, just because they want complete control of that person, that they're gonna have different like outputs of abuse that they're gonna do to that person. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So all of these programs that you talked about, except for maybe the Educate Your Son one, they're talking about for the people that are oppressed, like looking out for those people, like the victims, that kind of thing. Did any of them have to do with like talking to the oppressor and like walking them through that kind of thing, or like did you come across anything like helping them stop? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there are like the WAA program. It is for helping like rehabilitate victims, but it's also for like if you are like yourself, you are abusing, you realize, oh, I need to stop. There's also like a lot of organizations that you can talk to or that you can go to that will help you like break the cycle of that. So a lot of these programs, just because they are allowing the victims to like seek recognition, there's also programs that can help the abusers be able to stop it. If they're actually looking to stop, there's places you can go to stop it. So
It's a good thought. It's a good dimension to this that like probably needs to be talked about more.